Okay, welcome everyone. I'm Wilma Hodges, Director of Training and E-Learning Initiatives at Longsight, and I'll be your host for today's webinar. Today's session is a step forward for tests and quizzes in Sakai, and we actually have several panelists today. I'm one of them actually, from the STEP working group. We'll be talking a little bit about the work being done through this group to enhance the Sakai Tests and Quizzes tool. So before we get started, I'll just go through a few little housekeeping details as usual. Our presentation is being recorded, and a link to the recording will be sent out after the event. So you can view this later, or you can send the link on to other folks who may not have been able to attend. All of the previous sessions will be posted on our YouTube channel, so if you missed one of our earlier webinars, you can catch them there. And as we go through the presentation, it is going to be part presentation, part panel discussion. So sort of the first half, we're going to kind of go through a few slides and some talking points, but then we'll have a good chunk of time at the end to take questions from the audience. So if you have questions as we go, please feel free to go ahead and type those into the question area in the webinar platform. And we'll try to get to some of those throughout, but we'll have plenty of time toward the end for questions. So again, go ahead and type them in as we think of them, and we'll get to them at some point during the session. Also, if you have any follow-up questions, or if you'd like to volunteer to participate as a presenter for a future Sakai Showcase webinar, please contact me at wilma@longsight.com. Okay, so let me just briefly introduce our presenters today. We have Neal Caidin, the Sakai Community Coordinator at Apereo Foundation. Neal, his primary responsibility is to ensure the continued high quality and timeliness of the Sakai CLE releases. He's also a central contact point to facilitate communication and collaboration within the Sakai community. We also have Laura Gekeler, who is an LMS administrator and concurrent instructor at the University of Notre Dame. She's in her 16th year at the university, and she started her educational technology career as an application administrator 3 learning management systems ago, and is now primarily concerned with educating faculty as learning technology consumers while providing them with best platform possible. Notre Dame has been using Sakai since the fall of 2011. And I'm Wilma Hodges, Director of Training and E-Learning Initiatives at Longsight, and I'm responsible for a variety of training, documentation, professional development, and project management activities at Longsight. So let me transition here into a few quick polls. We just kind of want to get an idea of who is on the session today. So I'm going to launch this quick poll here. And if you could take just a couple of moments to tell us a little bit about your role at your institution or organization, go ahead and select one of those options.
I can do the music for it if you'd like.
Yeah, please.
Is there a person alive that doesn't know that goofy tune?
I don't think so. I think it's universal. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close the poll now and share that out. So as you can see, we have a fairly good spread of folks here. We've got about 10% administrators, 8% faculty, 50% instructional design or support, 32% information technology. So nice assortment of folks here today. All right, I'm going to launch our second poll now, and this is just to get a sense of how often you use the tests and quizzes tool. So if you use it a lot at your institution, you want to go ahead and mark the heavy use. If you use it a little bit every now and then, maybe only a few folks using it, go ahead and give us a sense of how heavily you use tests and quizzes. Okay. All right, we have about 91% voted. If you haven't cast your vote, please go ahead and do so. All right, let me go ahead and close that out and share the results. So it looks like more than half of the people attending today use it very heavily, and 35% use it moderately. So we have a much smaller group of folks who don't use it or just use it minimally. So I assume that you're here because you have a vested interest in tests and quizzes, so that's great. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and return to the presentation here. And you should be seeing my title slide, A Step Forward for Tests and Quizzes. Is that showing up for everyone?
I'm seeing it, Wilma.
Okay, great. Okay, so just a little bit of background on this project. It actually grew out of the Sakai Virtual Conference, which was held last November. And what we did as part of this conference is we wanted to make it have kind of a bigger purpose, I suppose. So what we did is we asked attendees to provide input on sort of their wish list items, the enhancements they would really like to see in Sakai. And then what we did was we took all the registration fees for the conference and we pooled those and earmarked them for Sakai development. So all of the registration fees went into to kind of a pot of money to be used for development. We actually raised over $12,000, which I thought was just wonderful. And
It was huge.
yeah, so we were very excited about that. And as part of the conference itself, we had a little voting poll that was in the site where the conference sessions were listed, and we had attendees vote on a list of potential enhancements for different tools or projects that they would like to see in Sakai that would be enhanced. And Samigo, surfaced as the highest vote there for the types of things people wanted to see. So then we dubbed our project the Samigo Tests Enhancement Project, or STEP, and came up with a nice little acronym there. Yep. And then, of course, we needed a working group of some sort to move the process forward from that point. So we got another group of folks together, most of which were involved in the original planning for the Sakai Virtual Conference or attending the virtual conference. There is also, and I have a link here in case you want to check it later for updates, but we have a page on Confluence that just has a little bit of information about the project, the names of the folks that have been involved with the working group and other people who've volunteered to help with different aspects of the project. So you can follow that on Confluence if you're interested in additional updates. We also provide periodic updates at the Teaching and Learning call, which happens usually on Wednesday mornings. So if you're interested in an update, you can find it in either of those locations. Now, to give you an idea of the timeline, when the working group got together, we decided on a few different phases for the project. So our discovery phase was December, January, and this was the point in time where we looked at all the different feature requests that were out there, existing JIRAs, patches that maybe existed in local installations that had not been merged back into the core community code for Samigo or Tests and Quizzes. So we looked at what had already been done, because there had been quite a bit of work done. The Samigo working group had done a lot of mock-ups. There was a lot of things out there that had been worked on but had maybe never seen it through to fruition. So we gathered a lot of that information together to determine what we should do, what the scope of the STEP project should be, because again, we have a limited budget since we only had the fixed amount that we had raised via the conference to do whatever it was we decided to tackle. And then the vendor selection phase came after that. So January, February is where we would put out opportunities for bid on the development of the work that we outlined in the working group as to what exactly we wanted to target for this work.
So we've just finished that part.
Yep. Well, not quite finished, almost. We're in the process right now of selecting vendors, but we've already put the bid out. The bid has
The bid has been out, and we have responses in, so that's our stage right now.
Right. After we select our vendor, the person who's, or the organization who's going to do the development, then we'll obviously move into the development and QA process where we actually work on developing whatever code needs to be done, merging the features in, doing QA to ensure that it doesn't break anything else, and that it can be merged into Sakai without any regression issues or anything of that nature. And then our plan is to showcase the features that we developed through this project at the Open Apereo conference in June. So hopefully if some of you are attending Open Apereo, you'll have a chance to actually see what we've been working on and what should have come out of this whole thing.
That's really fun to make that our deadline, and we've got our fingers crossed that we'll make it.
Yep. Also, the new features will be included after that, obviously, in Sakai. And right now, it looks like because of the release timeline, it probably won't make it into Sakai 11. It'll just be too late to make it for that. But so we're targeting Sakai 12, which would come out next year sometime. But there's always the opportunity to backport sooner if the code is out there in the community and an institution wants to apply some of these changes prior to the official release of the next version. So now I'm going to actually turn it over to Laura, and she's going to talk a little more about the discovery phase.
Sure, that's the bulk of our work as the working group here, was to figure out of all the possible things we could fix with tests and quizzes, Samigo, which ones are the highest priorities and which ones are maybe low-hanging fruit that would be easiest to include. So we tried to get a mix there. And the next bullet point. Yeah, so we had quite a lot of input and discussion going on, and we finally narrowed it down to 10 items, and those are the items that our bidders have come in and given us what they thought they could do with the time. We had prioritized those 10 items so that if it turned out some items took longer to develop than others, we could go ahead and say, okay, well, we're going to take the top 6 because we'll run out of money after 6 and do those. So we went ahead and put that together.
I'll just pull up the Google Doc real briefly, just so people can get a sense of what was on the list.
Exactly, and we really, when we came down to it, it boiled down to there was one feature, as Wilma brings up the list, there was one in particular we thought would be the most important, and given that none of us on the team are developers, we didn't really have a way to estimate how much these are going to cost. We know we have a fixed budget, but we don't know how far that budget's going to go. So the strategy that we took was to say, here is the number one thing that we absolutely want to get in, and then here's a list of other things we really like to get in if the money will go that far, and that's kind of how we presented it to the vendors. So they could be creative in terms of how they would respond to our bid, but at the same time, they knew that our number one priority is this one issue, which I'm sure that Wilma or Laura will highlight.
Yeah. Here's the big list. This was like 60-odd items on here that we culled from different JIRAs and that sort of thing. And then our final list, after we narrowed that down, was these 10. Each of them are related to a particular JIRA that was already out there, so it already had some discussion or even some preliminary work in some cases. So these were the different ones that we settled on as our top 10.
And the nice one for the top one that we listed, we had discussion around features that enhance the ability of work to be collected among groups or sections, and we were also really eager to build on work that had already been contributed, and the University of Dayton had a big start on this feature that's listed as SAM 1408. So that was the one that we said, well, we've absolutely got to get that in, and it brings tests and quizzes up to have, I don't think parity is the right word. I'm searching for a word. The emphasis seems to be on how do we do more group kinds of things using Sakai's platform. So that was our must-have, and all the others are prioritized on the list you're seeing on your screen here.
Yeah, and that top item also is important as far as supporting students with disabilities. If students need extended time on a quiz, right now it's a little cumbersome to create multiple copies of a quiz. So this would allow custom settings for those students who might need extended time or different deadlines, or some other time or date setting that would be different from the rest of the class.
And I would say that we quickly coalesced around that one as one that we had all heard from our various sources, institutions, or in the community that was really, really important for folks.
Yeah.
All right, let me go back to the presentation slides. And okay to move to the next slide there, Laura?
Sure.
Okay.
So this is just more detail, really, to emphasize that we reached out to Sakai commercial affiliates. We reached out to people who have proven track records in making contributions to Sakai code, and when they were all over it, it was really great to answer the questions about how we wanted their bids formatted, and to have 4 of them in hand to evaluate. So the deadline was Monday, and this Friday the STEP team is getting together again to kind of go through those bids, and hopefully we'll come up with a winner.
And just as an FYI, Longsight did not submit a bid. That's why I'm still involved with the vendor selection process. Otherwise, I was going to recuse myself from this segment of the work. But
that has been really great with both Longsight and all the other commercial affiliates, that people have really been operating with the highest integrity and recusing themselves when there's a conflict of interest. So that's been really great.
okay, I hope you're ready to move to the next slide, because that's where we are now. Okay, Neal.
Pretty much.
Right, so this is Neal again, and this is development and QA process, and I wanted to mention, just building on what we just been discussing, this is a real, this was a real grassroots group, and we did have representation from a couple of Sakai commercial affiliates, and again, as Laura was mentioning, throughout the process, thinking about, are there conflicts of interest as we're defining, different parts of the process, and making sure that we're very sensitive to that. And that's worked really well. But essentially, this is really a grassroots group. It's not anything that's officially sanctioned by Apereo or any organization. It's just a group of us in the community who want to take it upon ourselves to do something good and keep moving Sakai along and improving it. And once we get the vendor selection completed, which we are in process of now, so we're not sure exactly how long to take, but we're basically on our timeline. Once we have that vendor selected, then we'll engage them with development, and we'll learn more about how their process works, depending who we pick, and how they want to engage us. And we expect, of course, a certain level of quality from whatever development is done, but it's also best practice to any code that a developer writes, no matter how mature they are in the community and how familiar they are with Sakai or any other software, it's always a great idea to do testing early and testing often and have those iterations, and to notice things that might be anomalies in the software or inconsistencies with how people expect a Sakai to work, as well as to look for any issues that sometimes when you're in the process of developing, you might touch other areas that are unintended. Those are called regressions. In other words, something that worked earlier until you made your improvement, and then after making your improvement no longer works. So the QA process is really important to pick up on those things as quickly as possible, and the quicker we can pick it up, the quicker developers can turn around and fix it. And so we tend to have a number of different phases in QA, and for this development phase, I'm hoping we'll do that. We'll have a certain amount of QA even early on and not wait for too long or towards a release type of a candidate for that type of testing. And please contact me if you're interested in QA testing. We have quite a bit of information on our Sakai Community Wiki, Confluence, on the steps that are involved in testing, but I've also learned over time that it can sometimes help to have a little one-on-one interaction, or if you have a small group that wants to be involved, I'd be happy to set up some time virtually to work with you and explain how to use the different part, how to be engaged in the QA process, because it involves, doing the testing and reporting. We try and make the process as easy as possible to be involved. I use Google Docs quite extensively so that people can easily, sign up and share that data. But we also use Jira, which is our community bug tracking system. So getting some familiarity with the process that's involved in that can be a huge help as well. So we have the Open Apereo conference coming in June, and I hope that all of you or most of you will be able to attend. It should be a really great conference again this year. Of course, Apereo has a broad portfolio. It's not just Sakai, but Sakai is one of its flagship software offerings, open source offerings. So we usually have, and I expect we're going to have a very strong presence again this year, and lots of opportunities to meet people from other schools that are using Sakai and learn how they're using it. The Sakai Project Management Committee also will have a couple of meetings at the conference, and those are open, so if you want to learn, meet some of the leaders in the Sakai community and give some input to them. That's a volunteer group as well. That's a great opportunity for that. And at that conference, we've put in a presentation proposal, which I expect very likely will be accepted, that we can demo the features that actually get developed. So as we mentioned, we've got this pool of money, got this list of features, but which ones will actually get in other than that first one, we're not sure yet. So it'll be a great opportunity to share with you, what that new feature is going to look like, the one where you can release Samigo, allow different delivery settings for different groups or individuals, as well as seeing which of these other exciting items we were able to get into the Samigo Tests Quizzes tool. And there's also a birds of a feather proposal, which traditionally Samigos did a very strong showing for birds of a feather. And what a birds of a feather is, it's just a group of peers that have a common interest. They get together and they want to discuss the direction of, of a tool or of some capability that they would really like to see in Sakai. And so that's a really fun kind of session because it's totally about discussion. It's not so much about presentation, but really about discussion. That's what the term birds of a feather is intended to mean. So we certainly hope you'll join us at Open Apereo and introduce yourselves, and we look forward to it very much. And also there's going to be a community presentation that the Samigo Tests Quizzes, the STEP group, will be involved in as well, that will help kind of give you a bigger picture of all the different kinds of activities that are going on in the community and different ways that you can help, because there are many different ways to help, even within a QA type of environment. So just going back to QA for a second, there's, because I have that on my mind a lot, and there's functional types of testers of QA, and there's also, we can also use technical and developers as well in the QA process. Sometimes that involves reviewing code. Sometimes there are certain things that it's really, really hard for functional testers to test that requires more technical expertise. So we always appreciate when developers step up in that process and work closely with the QA team. So, and there's many other ways, documentation. So just a lot of different ways to participate, and just getting your ideas and meeting you and getting a sense of what your needs are and your institution's needs are, that's a huge value to the community as well. So we hope you will be able to join us and meet us, and we look forward to it.
did you want to take the last slide too?
Sure. So the new features included in Sakai. So as Wilma mentioned, we are targeting this for Sakai 12, and the reason is because we're in the process of defining Sakai 11 right now. It's pretty far along. We haven't got the final schedule yet, but it's the next major release for Sakai. And so the timing is such where we think it's likely we will be getting it into Sakai 12. There's always some possibility, depending on how things work out, that some of those features could be backported into Sakai 11. We'll have to look at that in terms of the risk to the Sakai 11 schedule when that gets firmed up a bit more. But because we're far enough along with Sakai 11 definition, which could be a whole other session of discussion, that's why we're kind of targeting it as more of a Sakai 12 feature. And the way that works is that there's a version of Sakai. Sakai is open source, which means it is available to download and test and use anytime you want. And we have releases of Sakai when the community has coalesced around a release. We create something called a branch, and then we focus all of our energy in getting that branch to a high quality, and we do something called tagging it, so that there's a place you can go and pull down that release and know that it's a community-tested and supported release. But then we also have an ongoing stream of Sakai that's constantly, it's like almost like a beta that's constantly being updated, and that's where Sakai 12 will be living until it's defined better, and the timing of that happens. And it is important because it's open source and it's relatively easy for technical folks to create patches, or oftentimes the patches are available in the open where they can pull down the patches and apply them to their local instances. There's always some caveats to those types of things, which is why it does take some technical expertise, and it also helps to participate in the community for those types of things, because you can learn better which patches are able to be backported into previous versions without any work, whereas sometimes it requires additional work because as the Sakai release keeps evolving, then a patch that worked in one version doesn't necessarily work in older versions. So we have to be kind of aware of that, and that's what the community is here to provide that kind of support and guidance on. So it should be, so now we're kind of into the question modes, and that's a good part of what we were hoping, is just kind of give you an update of where we are at this point in time, and then find out what's interesting to you and respond.
All right, let me open up the question panel. Let's see what's come in so far. Since I was running the slides, I wasn't watching the questions as closely. Let's see, we did have one question about it being recorded. Yes, it is being recorded. Let's see. When will Sakai 11 and Sakai 12 be released? Well, Neal touched on that a little bit already. Sakai 11 looks like fall, early fall. Is that?
That's my best guess. So we don't have a schedule firmed up yet. I think we're going to be pretty far along with the release by the time of the Open Apereo conference, but I don't think we'll be ready. I'm doubtful we'll be ready for release, so I do think early fall's a possibility. But until we've defined the exact scope and nailed down a schedule, what we're waiting on is there's a lot of work going on to what's called responsive design for Sakai 11, which is a type of framework where you can have Sakai automatically adjust to a different screen size to support multiple size devices. Excuse me. And so we're kind of waiting to see how that's developing, and that should be, we should have a lot more information in the next upcoming few weeks. And once we have that better defined, I think it'll be easier for us to set a firm schedule. But I think early fall is a good guess at this moment in time, but that could definitely change. And so Sakai 12 will be after that, because once we get Sakai 11 out, we'll want time for that to burn in. We'll want to make sure that we have a number of institutions that are early adopters of Sakai, and they'll put things in production quickly. And that will give us an opportunity as a community to make, be very responsive and have maintenance releases. So a lot of times after we do a major release, it's not uncommon that immediately we'll turn around and think about having a very quick maintenance release to cover the most urgent problems. And it isn't until we get past, getting that major release of Sakai 11 out and having 1 or 2 rounds of maintenance that we start then really seriously thinking about the next version, although sometimes things emerge. So possibly at the Open Apereo conference, perhaps the PMC will have some ideas about what will emerge next, or maybe we'll learn some new things that the community is thinking about. So really, really hard to predict Sakai 12 when Sakai 11 is still has a ways to go.
I would add to that, Neal, that so often, and I still, even though Notre Dame has been on Sakai since 2011, and I'm actually serving on the Imperial board these days, but I'd like our listeners to know that in some respects I still consider myself a newbie to the open source community. And as such, when I listen to things like what Neal just said, I try to get an idea in my mind of the community process and the organic nature of it, and how individuals all over, no matter what their role, can help on behalf of their institutions and can help as individuals as well. The part that there's another part of me that has an emotional response when I hear the things that Neal just said, like, oh man, you mean I'm not going to get these great Samigo features in my local environment for a year and a half? And I just want to unpack the comments that Neal was making about backporting and different versions of Sakai. If your institution hosts with a commercial affiliate, or if your institution has developers on staff, it's often easy to pick out these things that we, for example, this STEP project contributes to the community, and have developers pick them out and say, let's give it a shot here at our institution. And that means you get it earlier, and it means that your early input helps contribute to the overall community code. So I'm going to turn it back over to Neal, because he might be shaking his head going, no, Laura, don't say that.
No, I think that was great, Laura. I think that's really great. I mean, that is how the community works, is that we do have folks that sometimes they adopt whole versions of Sakai early, or sometimes they adopt, one of the tools. They really find that there's a tool that's far ahead in development from what they have and want to bring that in earlier into their system. And the community gains a tremendous amount by those early adopters. And the development team, the Sakai core team and PMC really pays attention to that. And when folks are adopting early, we often try and really respond as quickly as possible to those folks, because we really appreciate the effort that they're putting in terms of taking on some of these tools in the early phases where there still might be some things to shake out and make it a more bulletproof kind of system, or catch things that, and by catching those things earlier, then it benefits excuse me, the whole community and people who are going to be waiting a year or so down the road. I will say
I've certainly caught the bug, Neal, and it's my plan to get the step changes into the University of Notre Dame's Sakai version as soon as I can really schedule it. So I have caught the bug, and we will be one of the earlier adopters of these enhancements.
That's great.
Yeah.
Okay, we had another really great question that came in. Are there any plans to gain additional financial support if the bids are greater than the 12K available? That's kind of a multi-layered question there. For the initial seed money for this project, obviously we're limited by the amount that we raised via the conference. But we're really hoping that this will kind of start the ball rolling to maybe even serve as a model for a way to get sort of grassroots fundraising to incorporate features that the community institutions are looking for. So we're really hoping that as we move forward that there can be a lot more involvement from folks who are interested in seeing specific enhancements, and maybe have a little bit of money to contribute, or maybe some development resources to contribute. So we're looking at a lot of different ways. There's actually several projects in the community right now. STEP is one of them, but there's also the LEAP project, which is the Lessons Enhancement Project. There's a gradebook project. There's several different things going on that are kind of coalescing around that crowdsourced kind of model. So I don't know if Neal or Laura, if either of you want to touch on that a little bit.
I was just thinking that I'm hoping that we have conversations around that at the Imperial conference, because many of the Apereo software projects could benefit from having sort of templates of funding models that that different projects could pick and choose from, including sort of a Kickstarter sourcing that you talked to. So I've got my fingers crossed on that one.
Yeah, so we do have one Apereo presentation proposal, which is that community presentation where we're going to have representatives from all the major projects that are being funded in all these different ways and all these different models. So that'll be one way. It might make sense to do something that else is in addition to that. But yeah, I think that's one of the cool things about the Sakai community that I've come to learn and really enjoy in the few years I've been involved in the Sakai community, which is that there's many different ways of doing the same thing, and it's sort of by intention that we allow that to that's allowed to happen. It's not a top-down mandate from the Apereo Foundation or even from the PMC. It's more what does the community want to do, and then we try and keep all the relevant folks informed, because it's going to help us to be successful as well. But then there's all these different models that sort of organically grow out of different needs. So we have, Wilma mentioned those three or four different projects, and each one of them has a slightly different flavor of how we're, the fundraising is happening and how those improvements are going to be made. And hopefully we can find, as Laura was mentioning, hopefully we can find some sort of a template that makes it easier for, if you have an idea or your institution has an idea, that it will be easier to find other institutions that also have that same desire to improve Sakai in certain ways, and make it easier to do the fundraising or resource gathering that you need to launch a project.
Okay. We have another question about the Nimi tool. Sakai Nimi Tests is a great tool. Any comparisons going on there? Any chance of this being a standard tool in Sakai? I don't know who wants to take that one.
Well, I'll start with the, I'm the one who actually put forward the proposal to do a birds of a feather at the Imperial conference. I talked to people about it, of course, but I went ahead and wrote it because I think we do have to talk about whether or not Samigo in its current state is the best tool. If there should be multiple tools, if there should be LTI tools, if we should build a brand new tool from the ground up, if, what if, and so forth, kind of in a brainstorming way. And so you would be welcome to be part of that conversation and maybe promote the meme tool. That's CToon's. It is an LTI tool, isn't it?
I know it's CToon, so I'm not sure if it's LTI.
CToon's okay.
I don't think it's LTI. I think it's more of a contrib tool, so a tool written for Sakai that somebody can take and plug in.
Right.
Sure.
Yeah, and since it's contrib, I mean, one of the reasons that it's not a core tool is because it has a smaller pool of developers that support it. But if it were to gain wider use and acceptance and contribution, then potentially it could kind of get bumped up in importance, I suppose.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. And it's more of that grassroots thing again, where if a lot of institutions are using a tool and then they're also making investments to improve the tool, and they're getting plugged into the right communities, like the Sakai core team that does a lot of the day-to-day work of improving Sakai and incorporating community contributions, and the Sakai Project Management Committee, which, for the bigger picture decisions and kind of roadmap for Sakai lends a a gentle kind of guiding hand of what direction it needs to go in, then that's how something can happen. It has to have that. It seems to me like that's how things often happen, is that they really need to get that grassroots support, that institutions are really involved and engaged.
Okay.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And so I'm really not, at this point in time, it seems like most institutions are using Samigo over Nimi, but I guess it's possible something could change, or as Laura and Wilma mentioned, something else could emerge even.
Okay. Any other thoughts on that one before I read off the next?
No.
Okay. What is the best way for a small school using Sakai to get more involved in the community, QA, etc.?
Well, I guess that's a good question for me. Well, you definitely have to come to the Open Imperial Conference. I think just being a part of the conference lets you know what different roles are available. I've got so many interests now, it's been hard for me to figure out where to best apply them for me as an individual. For our institution, I'm seeing that our faculty are in the middle of needing an education process. What does it mean that now we have an open source learning management system, and what does it mean to be the best educated consumers of educational technology tools, and to make the decisions about how to put together a Sakai site that enhances and builds upon what you do in the classroom, and what parts of classroom activity can you do better in an online setting. So right now faculty are, this is the first time ever we've been able to do something like this, but our faculty are learning about the QA process by participating in it. And we're not getting everything right, but we are following one particular mantra, and the mantra is, if it isn't written, it didn't happen. That's huge. So we've come up with a QA process on our Sakai 10 update where faculty are getting their feet wet with sort of just a process for reporting your feedback on something that you observed. And I'm hoping that helps us become better Sakai community citizens and more able to participate as individuals and as an institution. But the other part is that even though I get to go to the Open Apereo conference, it's hard to know how to bring back what you learned there to your individual institution, or how to find funding to get more people from your institution to the conference so they can sort of soak it all in, what it's all about. But those would be keys for me, are thinking about ways to do that at your institution. Kind of understand what QA is, or documentation, if that's another place that's easy to involve instructional designers and faculty in, and getting more people from your institution at the conference.
Another way also, if you're not able to attend in person, or even if you are able to attend and you want to stay connected throughout the year, I would encourage you, if you're not already subscribed to some of the Sakai listservs, to subscribe to those. There's always announcements about things that are going on in the community. A lot of times there's special interest groups like documentation or QA or development, or all sorts of different things going on. The teaching and learning group usually has a weekly call, and those are open to anybody who would like to attend. So there's a lot going on, and the best way to find out about a lot of those types of activities is to keep up with some of those listservs to find out when they're happening, because we're always looking for volunteers to help out with projects or emerging tasks. So that's a great way to kind of get more deeply involved with the community.
Yeah, I think those are really good points. And just mentioning some of the other specific ones, there's also Sakai Core Team, which is an open meeting every Thursday at 10 a.m. Eastern, and that is really great for developers, especially if you're thinking about contributing. some code or bug fix, and then Wilma is leading up a documentation group for the online help documentation. So that's either through the Sakai Docs or directly connecting with her is a good way to get involved there. I'm good for if your specific interest is in QA testing, I can help with get you started with that. Those lists, we're working on making the list a little simpler. But if you subscribe to them now, you'll be notified as we're kind of reducing the number of lists from like 20 to 10 roughly. So it'll be a little easier to figure out where to go. So for example, if your main interest is teaching and learning, there's a couple of different lists that might appeal to you. There's a Sakai user list, a pedagogy list, and a portfolio list. We're going to try and pare those down so that there's one Sakai user list potentially, portfolio is sort of taking on a life of its own, and maybe a separate type of a group. So those things are in progress, but if you sign up for those lists, that is a good way to keep track. And if you have questions, feel free to ask me as a community coordinator, like which list should we subscribe to, what would be best for your needs. The lists are available. I don't know if we have, Wilma, like a place we can type in URL.
I think if you could type it in the chat, you can send it out to everyone.
Okay, let me try that. And I'll just type in the place where you can subscribe to the lists. Let's see.
And my experience with the lists is that you'll lurk for a while just reading through, and by reading through some of the topics that come up of interest to you, you'll sort of pick up the lingo. At first it might seem a little geeky, but after a while you go, oh, that's what they're talking about, and the next thing you know, you'll be posting to the list your own geeky remarks.
Yeah, it's funny. I can't seem to post into chat. I see the chat, but it's not taking it. My URL.
If you want to send it to me, I think you can chat with the other panelists. I can try posting it.
Okay. Let's try that. Oh, okay. Maybe I just. Oh, that's it. Yeah. Okay. So that's the link to the list, the place where you can currently subscribe to whichever list you want to join. And put in a plug for another one is the accessibility list. We definitely could use some additional participation for accessibility. That's led by Matt Clare from Brock University. So, and then we also have an open forum list, which is just anything general that you're curious about or that you want to post is fine. It's totally an open list.
Okay. Okay, hopefully you guys got that. I posted it in the chat and I also replied to a question that had asked about it to all. So hopefully everyone got that list or that URL.
We might even have it twice. So
yeah, for good measure.
Yeah.
Okay, we have another question about, is it too late to put new feature requests into Jira for Samigo, and hope to see if they can be added to the items that STEP is working on? Unfortunately, we had to narrow it down to 10, and we started with like 60 plus. So for this first phase, it's too late. However, I would really encourage you, if you have items that you want to see, that you go ahead and put them in a Jira, because that's really the best way to document those and to get them out there in the community, and other people can comment on them or maybe have done similar work or have similar needs. So even though we had to kind of cut it off at 10 for this first phase, we're really hopeful that there will be additional phases. So this is just kind of the starting point, and that there'll be additional work done along the same vein. So, it won't make it into this, our top 10 for this, part, but it could certainly make it into the next iteration.
And it's just an issue tracking system. You don't have to be anything special to start your own account there and just start. What's really nice is even if it seems overwhelming, just go ahead and start an issue and do your best on it, and they get reviewed so often that if you put it in the wrong category, for example, someone will come along and edit it and go, oh yeah, I know the software does do that, but no one's reported it. or sometimes if you do end up reporting it and someone already has, but you didn't note that before, they'll be combined, and your data will be part of the existing JIRA anyway. JIRA issue. We will say that JIRA, but it's an issue tracking system.
And I pasted that link out to everyone as well. You should have gotten that in the chat.
Thank you. Yeah, and if you get a little, more sophisticated, then it does help the community if you are able to do searching in JIRA and see if issues already exist and that you could, kind of tag on to them. We have some documentation in Confluence in terms of the overall process of how JIRAs are managed and the different states they go through, because they start awaiting review when they're waiting for someone to take a look at them, all the way through closing them. And they can be closed because they're fixed or because they're not really an issue or whatever the reason is. We try and document that well. JIRA is a very powerful system, and for some people it's intimidating, but as Laura said, if you create some issues, if you don't get it perfectly right, nobody's going to shout at you or yell at you. We'll just appreciate that you reported something and we can take a look at it, and if we need to reclassify it, we can do that. And if you need some additional help with that, I think we have some documentation, and I'd be happy to kind of point you to the best way to get started with JIRA. But it's, as Laura mentioned, it's free to sign up. You go on the JIRA site and create an account, and you can start perusing the issues there. We do have, and if you have questions about what you see, feel free to reach out.
Okay,
it's a great system.
We have a related question. For patches or for features used locally for quite a while that are stable, would it be fast to be considered for adoption in the community code during the enhancement project once the patch is submitted via new JIRA? That was actually one of the things that we looked at when we were going through the list, is which ones already had work, which ones had patches existing, because those were sort of the lower hanging fruit that they'd already had some development done. So I would certainly encourage you, if you have something that you've been using at your institution, go ahead and link that patch to the JIRA so that other people can take a look at it and work on it. And even if it's not part of this particular STEP project with our funding that came from the conference, that doesn't mean that it won't get worked on. And there's quite a lot of development that happens based on JIRAs that are out there that aren't formally funded through any particular project. It might just be that a particular institution or organization has an interest in an issue, and they go ahead and do the work. So if you share what you've done, it's definitely more likely that it'll be used and adopted.
Although on the flip side of that, because it is a community, and if you don't bring resources to do it yourself or to hire somebody to do it, sometimes there are cases where that doesn't get picked up, right? Because it's not like it's a company where there's a formal workflow and everybody is assessing every single issue and determining if our development team is going to update Sakai in that way. Because it's a community, it's a little bit more of an organic process, and we don't have that central development team. So it really is dependent upon other institutions that are also interested, or commercial affiliates that are interested in seeing the work done. So it takes a little bit, again, of that grassroots momentum oftentimes to get new things done. We do have a better workflow. For those of you on the line who are more tech aware, Sakai, the main part of Sakai has been moved to Git and GitHub, which makes it a lot easier for the community to accept patches. So that's a huge positive. We're still using the old source code control system because we have Sakai 10 and Sakai 2.9 that are on that system. But as we move forward, eventually everything will be done through Git and GitHub, which won't make any sense to those of you who have no idea what I'm talking about. But they're basically they're systems for managing our source code, which is the code that's used to build the system, and just the workflow and the management is just a lot smoother on the newer systems.
And Neal, I promise I did not close my ears and go la 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 while you were talking about Git and GitHub. I am absorbing these things.
Okay, we're getting close to the end of the hour, so I'm just going to take a couple more questions. We do have one about the types of activities. So I and other course instructors tend to use Samigo for exercise types of activities in courses. So Tests and Quizzes doesn't always get used as titled. Would the step process look into leveraging exercise or activity function more than just assessment? That strikes me as more of a something that you could probably customize internally and not something that would necessarily need to be changed in the code, because you can rename items in Sakai if your institution prefers a different default title for a tool. So that would be my first instinct in terms of the development process. I don't know if Laura or Neal, you have anything to add?
I know people here at Notre Dame who are using Tests and Quizzes as a way to collect assignments. I'm not really familiar with why they chose that instead of the assignments tool, but they make it work and they're very happy with it. Who am I to say they're wrong?
Well, whatever works, right?
Right.
Yeah, my only thought on that to add is that there is a very robust teaching and learning group that I think Wilma mentioned earlier, that meets every Wednesday at 10 a.m. Eastern, and it sounds like the type of topic that might be really great to bring up to that group, because they probably will have similar kinds of things where they have unusual use cases for the tool, or they might be able to respond with some creative ideas. Or that's also, as we mentioned, those lists. You can post those kinds of questions on the list, and then instead of having 3 of us that can consider your question, you've got many, many, many more people, because there's a huge number of subscribers to a lot of those lists. And so those are different ways of kind of reaching out and getting some of that feedback you're looking for. Plus, it sometimes helps generate ideas for other people, and that's the beauty of those discussions.
Okay, we have one last question, and this was about the use of multiple tools. We were talking a little bit about Nimi, or even possibly some other new LTI type of testing engine. And there was one comment saying that having too many choices of tools for the same purpose can sometimes be confusing. Couldn't the best features of the multiple tools be merged? In an ideal world, absolutely. In reality, sometimes I think it's a little harder to accomplish because of the different code bases. So, it may have been written in a way that it doesn't play well with others. I think that's kind of the issue when merging completely different, independently created things. However, one thing that we could certainly do is kind of a gap analysis to see, okay, if Nimi and Samigo are the 2 tools that are most commonly used, where are the gaps in functionality, and maybe target those so that they're more equitable across the board.
Yeah, and I'd say another thing that happens in the community sometimes is one tool, a couple tools are out there, and then one tool gets a lot more attention from the community, and then once that happens, you get maybe more contribution to it. So, for example, it seems like the assignments tool. It seems like there was an assignments tool and an assignments 2 tool, and it seems like a lot more people are using the assignments tool rather, not the assignments 2 tool. I have to look at that. We have some surveys that we do, and we have those published as well if you're interested, out on Confluence. And then what I'm noticing is that that a lot of the features, some of the features from the assignments 2 tool are kind of sneaking into the assignments tool, because I think that some of those institutions that were really liking the assignments 2 tool but are seeing, that maybe more people are using assignments, so that code base is kind of moving along a bit faster. Maybe our strategy should be to think about, kind of doing our own internal gap analysis and saying, if we could just get these couple of features in that we really love from assignments 2 into assignments, we'd be happy moving over there too and contributing on that channel. So that's another way kind of these things can work. But again, there's no mandate about how it works, but that's something I've seen.
There was one last thing that I'm going to go ahead and answer, even though I said I was only taking 2 more. But it's a clarification question. If anybody's confused, Samigo and Tests and Quizzes are the same thing. Samigo is just sort of the techie name for the Tests and Quizzes tool, but it's not a replacement for Tests and Quizzes as you know it. Tests and Quizzes is just another way of referring to the Samigo tool. So those are the same. Nimi, which is spelled N-M-E-M-E, is a different Tests and Quizzes tool that is kind of independently created and maintained by the etudes organization.
Yeah, I think part of the reason that Nimi hasn't caught on as much because it's even harder to spell than Samigo. I think that's part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a code name for the project that manages the code base, and then there's the name for the tool. And if you're Apple users, the Apple operating systems always have a number, and then they have the name of some cat, right? So it's kind of the same thing.
Okay, well, we are out of time, but I appreciate everybody's attending and great questions, and I hope you enjoyed the session and got something out of it. So thank you all.
Thank you, Wilma, for facilitating for us.
And thank you very much, Laura and Neal, for being excellent panelists, and I really appreciate your taking time today to share this information with our community.
Thanks for having us.
Our pleasure.
Okay,
Talk
bye.
to you later. Bye-bye.